Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God. I'm Jay.
I'm Fletcher.
And I'm Abby.
And today's story is about a gal named Jael. Or Jael. So, as we like to do every episode, we have a question. And today's question it ties into our story. So, I want you to think, guys, of a time where you had to ask for help. So, an embarrassing time where you needed to ask for help, and that was embarrassing to you.
Okay.
I think Abby should go first. She told us hers beforehand, and it's quite funny.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I was going to get the recycling, and I looked in the recycling bin, and I saw something move, and I just kind of backed up and screamed a little bit, and I looked in again, and there's this little mouse there. It's a little guy. I'm showing my fingers. It's like this big.
When you say screamed a little bit, are you lying? Did you?
Okay. No, it was not. It was just a little bit. It was like, ah! That was about it.
Okay.
It wasn't like a
You verbally scream, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, this little mouse. I don't like mice. I don't know why, but they freak me out, man. I don't like them. And it wasn't dead either, right? It was alive in the recycling bin. And so I'm like, okay, I can't I don't know. I can't just dump it into a garbage like that. That would be terrible.
That's the way to do it. You could
No, when it's alive, it would chew through the bottom. Anyways, so yeah, so I Googled how high can a mouse jump. And it was
there an autofill? Like, you know, when you Google things, there's autofill. Did that come up as an option?
How high can mouse was probably not a first choice.
No. Yeah, and so it
what
was,
was
13 inches. That's like the height of a recycling bin. That is, and I was like, there is no way I'm grabbing that recycling. Like, what if it tips sideways a little bit? Like, that's coming right at me and not happening. Not happening. So I called up this guy, and I'm like, Keith, there's this mouse. I'm like, it's not dead. It's not injured. It's just here, and I can't. It's in the recycling bin. So he comes over. He comes and grabs it, and he's like, "What do you want? Do you want me to kill it?" I'm like, "No, just go release it somewhere far." But I'm like, I'm not dealing with. He's like, "Yo, I tipped it sideways and it jumped," and I'm like, and that's why I didn't do it. That's why I didn't do it.
Jumped a whole 13 inches.
There you go. I wonder what the Guinness World Record is for
a mouse jump.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, so
We'll look it up later.
that's my story. All right.
It'll be in the show notes, right, Abby?
Yeah, that's right.
No way.
All right, I guess I'll go. So this one time I was fixing my car, and I had it jacked up, not high enough apparently, so I was underneath it. And I'm a bit of a bigger guy. I have a belly, and I was like right underneath it. And I went to scooch out, and it was a little tight. My shirt was riding up, my belly was hanging out, and I was squeezed in. So I needed somebody to come give my legs a little tug.
Was there
Tuck in your
WD-40?
belly a
There
little
was no lube, grease, no Vaseline, nothing to help me get out, but just a little tug to encourage my body out of the underneath of the car.
All right.
Oh my gosh.
Well, so during the birth of my second child, I was in the hospital with Michelle, my wife, and we were getting ready. She was getting ready to receive the epidural, which is a pain management medicine. So, see, Abby, there are things to manage the pain for childbirth that make it okay. So, and by this time, we've already had a kid, so I'm a pro, right? So,
Easy,
no worries.
No problem.
I've
Your
been
hard
through
work
this
is
before.
done, yeah.
Yeah. And so while Michelle is getting the epidural done, I noticed that somebody turned the heat up in the room, and I was sweating, and I was also cold and hot all at the same time, and the color started to leave the room, and I needed someone to help me find a place to sit down, and it was pretty embarrassing for me to have asked for help getting over to a seat while my wife
Your
was,
wife is giving birth, and you're like,
literally
wait,
in labor.
no, I need some help.
yeah.
Please.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Well, that's great.
a little bit embarrassing.
Anyway, all right.
So,
There we go.
as always,
There we go.
we do encourage you to read the stories for yourself. And as always, we also encourage you to send us, maybe you have an embarrassing story that you want us to know about.
Yeah. I feel like we've told a couple embarrassing. At least I
Yeah.
feel like I have told a couple embarrassing
Yeah.
stories.
That's our
at this
goal
point.
on the podcast is
Is
to get Abby
embarrass
to tell
Abby.
her embarrassing stories.
That's right.
There's too many. So why don't you guys like send some of your own so
Yeah.
we feel
Okay.
less
Yeah.
bad about ourselves.
But we do encourage you to read the story for yourself to get the whole picture of what's going on. And today, our story takes place in Judges chapter 4, verses 17 to 22. We're jumping from the time of Moses to the time of Judges, so we're jumping over the whole Joshua era. So it's about 200 years. The Promised Land has been mostly taken over by Israel, and that's kind of important to the story because they didn't drive out all of the nations that they were supposed to drive out, and so as a result, there's still conflicts that happen throughout the book of Judges. And so, they haven't fully defeated the Canaanites. And so Israel is led at this point by different individuals called judges, and their job being judging, which kind of goes with the name, right? But also military leadership and prophecy. And the judges were usually local, and sometimes there's even more than one that are overlapping. But they're not officially rulers of the nation, and they're actually what makes them take the position that they've got is that in each instance it says the Holy Spirit came on this individual, and so or the Spirit of God came on them, and then they were anointed for what was set before them. And so God is actually the king of Israel at this time, and the phrase that's often repeated, and I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before, is that the phrase that's repeated throughout the book is, there was no king in the land at that time, and the people did what was right in their own eyes, which, just in case you were ever wondering, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So
If everybody thinks they can do what they want, you might have a problem. So today's story takes place between 1150 and 1200 BC. It's towards the end of the Bronze Age, moving towards the early Iron Age, and that's actually going to come into our story a little bit. It's the start of a dark age for most of the ancient Near East. There's lots of war and destruction throughout most of the kingdoms in the area, and there's like social collapse of places like Egypt, Mycenaean Greece, the Hittites, the Kassites of Babylon. So it's actually like there's not a lot of literature, there's not a lot of art or historic or archaeology found from this time.
right.
It's very dark, meaning there's not a lot found.
If there were, it would be like Tim Burton-esque. Or
And then the Assyrians are kind of the only ones that really survive this hard time. That and the Egypts, but they were thoroughly weakened.
Right.
The Egyptians I was reading up on what happened to them in like 1200 BC, and they were attacked by the Sea Peoples.
Yeah, this is
And that's
weird.
it. And they don't know who it was. They just know that
Like
somebody attacked.
Aquaman?
Like, yeah, maybe.
Oh,
it was
yo.
Atlantis. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That would have been cool.
If it was
Wasn't
Aquaman.
Atlantis isn't that rumored to be in like Spain area? That's not that far away.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, but who
Yeah.
knows?
Oh, okay. I thought it was
According to Plato, it was 9,000 years ago.
Spain. Okay.
No, 9,000 years from his
Before
time.
him.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Him.
Yeah. That's
So I don't
super
think it's
interesting.
at the same time.
Right.
Oh, well, you know.
But
what?
anyway, yeah,
The sea
Egypt had
people.
this attack during Ramses III, and it was the Sea People, and they have no idea where they came from. So I found
Maybe
that
it was the
pretty
Little
cool.
Mermaid then.
There you go.
They're from Denmark, though. That's a
They're
little
fr- oh, really?
farther.
Well, they could have traveled south
Okay.
to Greece, to the Mediterranean. Who knows?
Sure. Who knows?
Which
All right.
brings us to geography
There
with
we
Abby.
go. There we go.
She knows they're from Denmark.
They're from Denmark, yeah. So in verse 2, we see that Jabin is the king of Hazor. So now Hazor was actually a major deal because it was the largest site of the biblical period in Israel. And this was 10 times the size of Jerusalem during Solomon and David's reigns later on. Now this story is talking about Canaanite Hazor. So this is important to differentiate because there were two sections of the area, the upper city and the lower city. Canaanite Hazor occupied both areas. The area had a large population, and it had a strategic location between Egypt and Babylon, which made it one of the head of all those kingdoms, according to Joshua 11, verse 10. So Jabin reigns over Hazor, but his army commander, Sisera, was based out of a place called Harosheth, which is most likely a town on the right bank of the Kishon River in Israel. So that's actually the modern day place is the Kishon River in Israel. So the battle took place at the base of Mount Tabor, which, fun fact, is most likely the mountain that Jesus had his transfiguration on. Yeah. And when the Israelites started winning, Sisera peaced out and went north towards Kadesh, which is about 70 kilometers away. And that's where he saw the tent of Heber, who is his ally, who we're going to talk about today. So,
all right, let's get into the story then. So, as we know, we were in the time of the judges, and this guy named Ehud, who was a judge, he dies. And
wait, didn't Jay play him last season?
We talked about him. No,
did.
Jay didn't play him or the Fat King.
Right, we talked a little bit about Ehud last season. So he's dead.
Yeah.
Very sad. And then there's a line that's almost at the end of every chapter of Judges, and it's the people did evil in the sight of the Lord. And then God does something. So God actually delivers them into the hands of King Jabin of Canaan, and then who ruled in Hazor. And then his military leader is named Sisera. It's the beginning of the Iron Age, and chariot warfare is like this huge thing at this time period. And this guy, what's his name again? Who's the King Jabin had 900 iron chariots.
Yeah.
My gosh.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Why?
Oof.
Who needs
Which
that?
and that coming out of the Iron Age, bronze that
it's new. It's like modern technology. You'd got the fresh
top of the line modern warfare. Yeah.
Wow.
F-15s or whatever the flight. Modern warfare, top of the line, best stuff. And he is devastating Israel. So he's actually cruelly ruling over Israel for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Eventually, this prophetess named Deborah comes along, and she starts judging over Israel. And she tells this man named Barak that all I could think of was Obama for some reason. Barak. That God had told him to go get 10,000 men and meet Sisera at the river for battle. This is the Kishon River, the same place. And then she tells Barak that God will give Israel the victory. And Barak's like, okay, great. I'll go get these men as long as you come with me.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, of course I'll go. But because you won't go by yourself, she gets this prophecy that Barak... Sorry. I can't think. She gets this prophecy that Barak won't get any glory for killing Sisera. So, then what happens is the prophecy says that Sisera will be killed by a woman.
Right.
Nice.
We'll see if that comes true, though.
Mm-hmm.
So the battle starts, Israel with their 10,000 and Sisera with his chariots and then other men, of course. It wasn't just 900 chariots. They had men as well.
Yeah.
And Israel starts winning this battle. And then this is when Sisera, the general, flees the battle and starts running north.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing.
So crazy, interesting thing about that taking place. The river area where they were was historically dry at this time of the year, which is why they would go into battle with 900 chariots, because the chariots, as modern warfare as they were for the time, they didn't do well in mud.
No.
Right? And so they needed dry ground. And this was like the banks of the river were dry clay land. And so there's that, and they have all this modern warfare added to the fact that they were Baal worshippers, and they believed that Baal oversaw the weather, and that he would Baal would give them favorable weather conditions for whatever they were entering into. And all of a sudden there's flooding and flooding and flooding in the land, and the banks of the rivers were told overflow. And so part of that was contributing to the chariots not being able to do what the chariots would do in battle. And so I just think it's amazing that what we note here is what we put our faith in, right? And what we put our trust in. And so Sisera is putting his trust in
his army,
his chariots and his technology, and saying there's no way they even stand a chance because we have the best of the best, when in fact Israel has the best of the best because they've got God who actually is in control of the elements and the weather and all of that. And so Yeah, it's a great reminder of where we are called to put our faith and put our trust, and where we're called not to put our faith and our trust, and we're not to put our faith and our trust in our own efforts,
in Baal.
Or in Baal.
Well, I always like these little times when God kind of shows up, the other God of the people. It's like with Joshua and the sun and like that kind of thing. Not Joshua and the sun, sorry, in the Egyptians and the sun.
Right.
And this in Baal, and what happens with Elijah as well.
Yeah.
God's like, you know what? I'll do what your God's supposed to do, and I'll do it better. And I always
Picking
find
up
that
the
very
slack.
funny.
Yeah.
So there's this man named Heber, and he lived in the area, but he wasn't an Israelite. He was a Canaanite who were at peace with Jabin of Hazor at the time. This is what Abby said. So Sisera was running north from the battle, and he goes to the tent of Heber. He's not there. Just his wife Jael is there, and she goes, "Oh, come on in." She ends up feeding him. She ends up giving him a drink, and then he goes to sleep. He gives her a thing, and she says that she'll watch the door to make sure nobody's coming. And then while he's asleep, Jael takes a tent peg and a hammer and gently knocks it through his... It says gently, which I find very funny because it's going through his head. And ends up killing him. And I like the line, the verse, it says, and he died because of this. And I'm like,
Right,
well, yeah,
yeah.
you just put a tent peg through his head and into the ground. So
So good.
later on, Barak was looking for Sisera, because he ran away from the battle. And Jael went out and said to him, come with me and I'll show you the man you're looking for.
Yeah.
And then she brings him into his tent, and there he is, dead on the ground.
There he was, gone.
I wonder
What
if it hurt.
What is... Well, he was sleeping,
I
but
know.
would it wake you up? I think so.
If it was gently, maybe.
Yeah.
it was slowing. Ow!
Right? What are you doing? Whoa! Ah!
Yeah, and then it's too late.
But yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So Jael, she
Yeah.
did it.
She-
So yeah, that brings us to the whole point of the story. Barak finds him dead, and this is the fulfillment of that prophecy of Deborah that we talked about.
Right.
Deborah said, because you weren't trusting God to get the army for you, you had to bring me with you. You're not going to get the glory for killing the general. And a woman ends up getting it instead.
Nice.
And then if you look at the next chapter of Judges, chapter 5, there's actually a song written, not specifically about her, but about the story, but she is mentioned by name in that story.
Which we know is a big deal.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, if you look at the history of the song, it's actually considered to be older than the actual chapters of Judges. Like
Right.
the song and the story is
So
older.
like it was recorded right when it took
Exactly,
place.
as
Oh,
opposed to
that's cool.
telling the story later on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just give you a little... It's most blessed woman be
No,
Jael.
you're supposed to sing. You got to sing it.
Most blessed woman. No. Be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of tent-dwelling women, most blessed. He asked for water, she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a noble's bowl. She sent her hand to the tent peg and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera. She crushed his head. She shattered and
See, that doesn't sound
Excuse me.
gentle.
No, she shattered and pierced his temple. Between her feet he sank, he fell, lay still. Between her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell. Dead.
I would really like to hear the tune of that
Yeah,
song.
how that was
Right?
supposed to go.
That's great.
It wasn't as nobly sung as
I just
probably what
picture
it-
like medieval times, like a jester in a court singing. Like, can
With
you?
his little
yeah,
lute.
yeah.
The little lute. Yeah.
That'd be great. So they wrote a song about her for this great deed that she
I
did.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
So the kind of questions that I have about this, why the heck did she do this? What a weird thing to do. And I don't know if we have an answer to that because it's a long time ago and we don't have all the answers necessarily. But, she saw the opportunity to do what was right in the eyes of God anyway,
Right.
to kill the leader.
Yeah, and the text doesn't give us the insight.
No, it
into
doesn't
that
give us
to-
the answer.
to even say, and the Lord, she heard the voice of the Lord and
Yeah,
did this.
exactly.
She does it and takes that opportunity, which I guess we're thankful for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing that she did it, but I wonder what came over. I'm just interested to think what was going on inside her head when did she hear from God? That would have been something
Right.
cool, maybe, because it was done and it was in a prophecy, so God knew it was going to happen, and
Yeah.
and then Deborah knew it was going to happen, and then she fulfilled that prophecy, which I find pretty cool.
Yeah.
Another aspect is the shame on Barak and the shame on Sisera. So Barak it was supposed he was the guy leading Israel's army, and he wanted the glory that came with winning a battle, right? Winning a battle, winning a great victory, and eventually conquering Jabin and his army, and then freeing Israel from their bondage, which is a huge thing. And then he didn't get the glory because he was too scared to kind of do it on his own.
Right.
So his shame about that, and then also Sisera being the general of a massive army, running for his life because they were losing, and then being killed by a woman in a tent is a pretty embarrassing thing when you're a big general, right?
Yeah. And all I can really think, like, for the Barak part of it is do what you're told.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a good principle for us to live by. It's not so much like just, do what you're told, young man. But when there's a task that's been set before you, and you know that it's been set before you by God, step forward in it, knowing that he's going to accomplish what he's told you he's going to accomplish. Faithful is he who calls you, and he will bring it to pass, we're told. And so as we see ourselves in difficult situations that are scary, where we feel that we need someone else to step in and...
Well, like he asked for Deborah's help, somebody who was more experienced, who knew what they were doing.
Right. And basically that wasn't the way it was supposed to go. He was supposed to just step out and do it. And so, we need to operate in a place of obedience.
Yeah, that's good. So you kind of answered it. So I'm just going to let you guys add anything you want to here. But looking at the story, how does it fulfill the rest of the story of God throughout the Bible?
I have a little bit to add, because we're talking about helpers this season.
Right.
So I wanted to just think about how Jael was kind of helping the prophecy get fulfilled and helping finish, what's his name? Oh my goodness, Barak. I got to think of Obama. It'll remind me of the name. Helping do Sisera's job for him.
Right.
And that's kind of fulfilling her role as a helper in the story. And then she also helped, in the big picture, Israel being freed from King Jabin, which I find really cool.
Right, which I think also just speaks to the sovereignty of God, as we see throughout the fulfilling of his story in using who he chooses to use, because she wasn't a part of the story leading up to this happening. She's kind of like a side character in it all, and God says, well, I'm in control here, and I'm going to use who I will use, and uses her.
Yeah, I really like that, because Deborah gets this prophecy that Israel will win the battle.
Right.
She doesn't know how that's going to happen, right? And then God ends up using this woman in a tent, and it was the strangest story that you'd ever think of. Yeah. But that's the will of God, and they followed that. And it's cool. We love, like, we talk about Deborah as a woman in leadership in this, but she didn't even do it, right? No. She spoke the truth, which is so important in this, and it's integral part of the story as well. But then it was fulfilled through someone else as well.
The helpers save the day.
Helpers save the day.
Just like in Sky High.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah.
All right, well.
I think we need to cut this episode now.
no more Sky High references for the rest of the podcast, please.
My mom texted me after that trailer came out. She's like, that was a really great movie.
Oh no.
So you should really go watch it, Jay.
I saw the trailer that you guys showed me. And
you weren't excited
wasn't
by
convinced.
It? All right. That's okay.
Well, you know what? These helpers are better anyways.
Yeah.
None of them turn into guinea pigs. All right. Well, that's all that we have for today.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
See you
Bye
next
for
week.
now.